Good afternoon, dear teachers. Welcome aboard to one more webinar. I'm talking to you from Cambridge office here in São Paulo. I'm Katia Valli, Schools and Exams Marketing Manager. What about you? Where are you joining from? Let me take a look at the chat. People already interacting. Hello, Maria Silvia from Florianópolis. Luisa from Rio Grande do Sul. Ruby from Ecuador. Hello, Ruby. Great to see so many of you all over Brazil, in the countryside of our states. This week, we are still celebrating Teachers' Day. Congratulations, everyone. As you know, we've been running these webinars, thinking about you, considering you, having you in mind in your professional development. So in our next slide, we have 2 QR codes. On the left, you have access to Cambridge Brazil YouTube channel. We place all the recordings of these webinars there. So please check the ones that have passed, that they are really worth watching. And on the right, we have a QR code directing you to our next webinar. So this week, we have a webinar tomorrow, Thursday and Friday, when we will end this series of webinars. I also invite you to follow us on social media, which is in our next slide. We are in Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. We will have time at the end for questions, so please send your questions in the Q&A tool. In the end of this presentation, take a look at the chat. There will be a link for feedback, and from the feedback form, you will download your certificate. All these webinars are being recorded, and the recording will be available soon in our Cambridge YouTube channel. Today, we have the honor and the privilege of having Claire Ross with us. This is the second time she's here with us. She started our series of webinars with a topic on pre-primary, and today she's going to talk about teenagers and get them talking. Really interesting topic. Claire has over 20 years of international experience in ELT. She is a freelance training consultant and education expert. She collaborates with institutions like Cambridge University Press and Assessment, the British Council, and Ministries of Education. She delivers impactful teacher education projects, developing online learning courses and writing classroom teaching materials. Thank you so much, Claire, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Katia, and hello, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you today. Please say hello in the chat and keep your chat open as we go, because I'll be asking you questions, and we've got a few tasks, and I'd love to hear what you've got to say about this topic. So let's get started. I've got an activity for you straight away. So I've got 3 pictures here. They're all related to me in some way. So I want you to look at the pictures, and what do you think they tell you about me? So you can mention one of the pictures or all of them. What can you find out about me from these pictures? So ideas in the chat. Here we go. So we've got running as a theme. You love the beach, native country, where you live, the things I like. Oh, that's a good one, Ivan. I think that probably does cover it. Dolores, you love knitting. You're absolutely right. And yes, Adriana, anybody else? Any other knitting fans here today? And I love knitting. That's this one here. It's a hat that I made for my niece. I love running as well. This is one of my first races I ever did. And this middle one, I do love the beach. This is also where I live. So I am British, but I don't live in Britain anymore. I live in Cyprus. So a small island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean, near to Greece. So we have beautiful beaches here, and they do all make me happy, Raphael. All right. So thanks for taking part in that. We'll come back to that activity later on, so don't forget it. This is what we're talking about today. We're going to be thinking about how we can make our classrooms safe so that our teenage learners feel comfortable speaking. We're going to think about what makes an effective speaking activity. How can we plan speaking into our classes, and how can we make sure we integrate it? And I've got some nice activities at the end as well that you could use in any class for a bit of integrated speaking. All right, so the first question then, let's kick off on this straight away. If our learners don't feel safe or comfortable, they're probably not going to speak. So let's think about the reasons behind that. So what do you think? What stops your learners from speaking in class? Love to hear your ideas in the chat about this. Maybe you've got some learners who don't say much. Maybe it often happens that you ask a question and no one answers. Or maybe you set a task and your learners are very quiet. So what do you think is behind this? All right, so I'm having a look through the chat here. I've seen lots here of shyness and of fear, scared of making mistakes. That seems to be quite a common one. Challenging questions is another one. Thank you, Fabio, for that. Not motivated, Maria. Yes. They don't like being exposed. Adriana, I think you're right. And someone else said there, Dolores, they don't want to be mocked or laughed at. I think that's very true, isn't it? Especially for teenagers. It's really important, isn't it, what everyone thinks of them. They don't want to look silly. All right, thank you for those ideas. It's important that we think about it, I think. I've got some ideas there. I wonder if they're the same as the ones you've put in the chat. I think some of them are. I've also mentioned here, maybe they don't have enough language for the task. So maybe that's related to the task being too challenging. And I've also put here, maybe they're not warmed up. So that's the case, isn't it, sometimes? Or maybe they're just having one of those days and they don't feel like it. And I think especially teenagers can be like this. And I think, we do need to be sensitive to that, don't we? And then the last one, maybe they can't think of anything to say. That's true as well, isn't it? So maybe, again, they're unsure, as Louise is saying. Now, when we're talking about making the environment safe, let's just think about what that really means. So people have done quite a bit of research about this, and actually you can find the booklet I'm going to mention. I'll give you the links at the end of the chat. It's one of the Cambridge papers in ELT, so it brings together lots of research in the field, which is really nice. And this is what they found. They said, what's a safe speaking environment? Well, it's vital in supporting students' language learning. And a safe speaking environment is an environment when time for speaking is valued. I think this is important, not just for extra practice, but as time when new learning opportunities come to life. So I really like this. Now, we want our students to speak because it helps them to learn and practice language, doesn't it? But we don't just want them to keep saying the words they already know. We want it to be an opportunity for them to expand and develop their language. Maybe there's a need to express themselves and they don't have the language, and we can help them with that. Or maybe their partner can help with it sometimes too. So in the research, they found 3 key things. There's always something like that, isn't there? 3 key things or 4 key things. It helps us to remember as well. So what were these 3 key ingredients to a safe speaking environment? Well, there you go. They've all come up at once. Number 1 was immersive tasks. So these are the type of tasks where students are really involved, really engaged. They've got the right level of challenge, not too difficult, but also not too easy. So something interesting. And the tasks where students are so involved in doing it that they sort of forget that they're practicing and learning at the same time. So tasks that are very relevant. And I think that's especially important, isn't it, for teenagers? And then the second one is about the interaction between students. And that's, again, something that we can influence, I think, as teachers. It's building that community in our classroom, building relationships between ourselves and our students, and also between students themselves. So giving them lots of opportunities to work collaboratively and get to know each other. And then this last one is about the feedback that we give students. And what they found in the research, oops, let me go back, disappeared. Oh, no, sorry about that. Let me bring that up again. What they found in the research was that some types of feedback, even though we mean it in the right way, can actually shut down speaking. So if a student's speaking and we say something like, good or well done, that can sometimes cause students to go, oh, well, I've finished, I've done it. Thanks, I don't need to do that anymore. Whereas the kind of feedback we want to be doing is encouraging students to maybe explain or elaborate or tell us a bit more about why they think this, and also tell them what they're doing well as well, so they can keep on doing it. And then on the right here are some of the tasks that they found in the research that were good immersive tasks. So I wonder if you recognise here any of the tasks that your students like doing, or any tasks that you see in your course books, because I think these are quite common tasks, aren't they? Problem solving, telling a story, sharing opinions, discussing, and then this one, making or creating things together. Often in project work we do that, don't we? Okay, and yeah, debating about social issues, that can be a really good one for teens, can't it? So let's think now then about our students who aren't speaking so much. We need to examine why. We need to think about what they need. We need to think about how to create this environment. And maybe these are some questions that we should be asking ourselves. So are they getting what they need from me? Are they getting this positive feedback? Are they getting validation? Are they getting something that is interesting and relevant? Am I motivating them? Am I creating a safe environment? Is it safe for my learners to speak? Do they feel secure? And what of the things that are going on do I have control over as a teacher? What can I influence in my classroom, and what can I do differently? And I think this helps us, doesn't it? When there's been an activity that hasn't involved a lot of speaking and we thought it would, we need to look at it afterwards and think about why. Or if there's some students who aren't as involved in our class as we would like, again, we need to ask ourselves some questions. All right, let's think now about what makes an effective speaking activity. Now, let's go back to the beginning. So I showed you 3 pictures, and it's difficult to get you speaking in a webinar, but let's say we managed to do that. Do you think that that would be a good speaking task, to show pictures and then to get the other person to guess about the pictures? What's your opinion? Is that a good way to get students or people talking? Or how would you suggest improving that activity? What could make it better? What could improve it? What would make it more engaging, do you think? So visuals can help, Fabio is saying. and getting them figuring things out for themselves. So that's sort of about problem solving as well, isn't it, Ruby? Thank you. Prompts can help, Fabia. That's a good suggestion. So maybe some useful language. I'm glad you said that. And an example, Luciana. Yes, great. Christiana's mentioning scaffolding. This is fantastic because we're going to be talking about all these things in this webinar. And someone else has mentioned prompts. Thank you. Thank you, Perla. Yeah. So it does start a discussion, doesn't it? I wonder if you were thinking, oh, I like running too, or if we do have any knitters, let me know. I know we are a minority. All right, so what have we identified so far that makes a good speaking task? Because we do have criteria in our mind, don't we? Well, how about this? I've got a list here. I wonder if you can guess any of these missing words. So I've given you the first letter of some of them. This could be a speaking task, couldn't it, if I was if we were face to face? All right. So we've got real life speaking skills. What about the next one? Communicating and doing what with someone else? Well done. Yes, interacting. What about the next one? A good speaking task is, I can't remember what this word is. Oh, excellent. Thank you, Gustavo. It's personalized. Yes. So it's related to learners' lives and interests. I think that's important because it doesn't necessarily mean learners telling us all about their personal inner lives, but it does mean things that are relevant to them or things that they can have a view on. What else do we have? Yes, Ivana, that's right. What kind of goal do we want to have? There we go, Fabio, well done. An achievable goal. And then we need the right, Maria, yes, level of challenge. It should be, yes, thank you, Vanessa. And it should be fun and build students' confidence. There we go. And the last one, yeah, and communication, Adriana. Yes, I agree. It should allow students to express themselves without worrying. So that's where we want to get to, isn't it? To get rid of this fear of getting wrong. Okay, so let's go back. Let's take some of these criteria now. Let's go back to that task I did at the beginning. I want you to think about what you do with it. So how would you adapt it for your students? What would you do differently? What would you change for your students? So maybe think about these criteria and what would you do differently if you were doing this speaking task? So have a think. Let us know in the comments. Would you be the one with the photos, for example? Would you be showing your own photos? So Fabia said, I'd ask them to prepare pictures for others to talk about them. Great. So a bit of preparation involved, isn't there? You'd have to tell them the day before, bring them in. Maybe you'd have a theme. I mean, mine is certainly my interests. Maybe you could have a different theme. Any other ideas? What else would you do to adapt this? Okay, thank you, Maria. So adapt the content according to age. Right. Okay. What else? Any suggestions? Do you think the level is right? I mean, whatever this is, if you leave an activity like this, it's quite open, isn't it? So you can allow learners to really speak about whatever they can. So I think it's quite adaptable. Okay, here we've got some ideas. Some WH questions, that's a good one. So to encourage a bit of conversation, thank you. And adapting it to fit the culture, right. And some prompts, thank you. Yes, we mentioned that before, didn't we? Okay. All right, I'm going to show you a couple more. Let's do this with some activities from course books now, because I think it is important we think critically about an activity, whether it's in a book or whether it's one like this that, you know, a colleague has told you about. So here's another activity. Thank you, Christiane. I've just seen your comment there. Really nice. Here's another one. Okay, so this is from a B2 course book. Maybe you're using this course book, I don't know. What do you think about this task? Is it a good task? How would you adapt it for your own students? So they've got to look at the photos about summer jobs. So is that something in Brazil? Do students do summer jobs? Would that be something relevant? Would it be relevant to their real lives? What would you do here? Would you do this task as it is? Would you change the questions, for example? Would you make it more personalised? I mean, it is asking for their opinions, isn't it? What do you think? Okay, Bruno, so how might you do this differently? Would you use the pictures for something else? Could you ask different questions? It's obviously from a unit all about work. Okay. All right, Gustavo. So teenagers haven't started their work lives. Ruby saying it makes students think about their future. Okay. All right, maybe it could be about school life. Nice, Louisa. So you could have some different pictures that you would choose for that activity. Yeah, why not? Good or bad things about different subjects. That would be a nice one. And then we've got some quite interesting questions here now. Thank you, Raphael. What kind of job do you think is most stressful? It's good to ask interesting questions, isn't it? All right, I've got one more. We'll do this one quickly. This is from an A2 book. So a little bit lower level now. So have a look at the task. So students work in pairs. They write conversations. They decide where their conversation is, and they have a request. That's the 2 criteria. And then they role play their conversations for the rest of the class. And the rest of the class have to listen and guess which place they're in based on what they say. So what do you think about this one? Do you think your students, it is Prepare, Bruno? Yes, I've taken some examples from Prepare. What do you think? Would your students enjoy this? Is it a good task? Could you adapt it? How would you adapt this one? Have a think about this one. So or do you like it the way it is? What do you think? Have you done a task like this before, where students do a role play and then it's kind of a listening task for the rest of the class? All right, so Ruby thinks it will be fun. Students will enjoy that. Ivan, adding some visuals. I like that idea. That's going to help and also get their imaginations going, isn't it? Nice suggestion. And another Ivana, an example. Great. Yeah, I think it would be a nice way to flow through the lesson too, Raphael. Yeah. Okay, so Christiana, so about jobs here. So you're linking this to the previous activity, perhaps. Yeah, and Ruby, I like that idea that whole class listens to the role play. If your students are going to feel comfortable enough to speak in front of the whole class, that would be nice. I think otherwise you could put them in smaller groups, couldn't you? All right, some fantastic ideas. I like that one, that last one from Dolores as well. Presidential candidates, why not? Okay, so, all right, very topical, thank you. Okay, so let's move on now. We thought about what a successful speaking activity can be and what criteria we're using and how we can adapt them. Let's think in a bit more detail now about planning. So the decisions that we make when we're planning a lesson can have a big impact, can't they, on whether it works in class or not. So when we're planning, we need to think about these things. So what happens before, what happens during, and also what happens after the speaking activity. And we need to think about time. So I don't know if you're like me, But if I want to make sure I've got time for speaking, I think about that first. I think, oh, we're going to spend about 15 minutes on that bit. And then I plan the rest of the lesson leading up to that to make sure I've got that chunk of time at the end. But I'd like to think about some different types of things we do in a speaking lesson or in a lesson where we've got a speaking activity. So I've got a task for you. I'm going to show you some things on the screen, and if you can scan the QR code, you can go and do an activity yourself online. It's a drag and drop activity. But if that doesn't work for you, you can just look at those activities on the left and decide if they go before or after the speaking activity. So highlighting useful languages, is that something you do before a speaking activity or after it? So that is the task. Now, I don't know if Maju, if you can paste in the link. I don't think I can do that as I'm presenting, but I have got a link for this in the slides there as well, in case that helps. Otherwise, scan the QR code. Otherwise, just have a look and decide if they're before or after. And if anybody manages to get in and do the activity, let me know and click say a done in the chat. Okay, Bruno, that's brilliant. So it's working for some. Okay, and Vanessa and Anna Lucia. Fantastic. Oh, that's great. Okay, so if you've done it, you've already got your feedback. For those of you that aren't managed to open the QR code, here are the answers, which I'm sure you got. So things to do before. We're talking, aren't we, about prompts and examples. So that's all part of the useful language. Thinking time is super important, isn't it? Setting a goal and a time limit and making sure students know what to do, because without those things, those can be reasons for students not to speak, can't they? They don't know what they're doing, they haven't had time to think, they don't have the language ready, and you know, they don't know how long they've got, for example. And then we've got our after speaking activities here as well. So reporting back on the task, so you kind of draw it to a nice close. We want to tell students what they've done well. Remember, that's part of the safe speaking environment, so we're giving positive reinforcement. We want to praise students for working together well as well, don't we? And also a bit of focus on accuracy is nice. And after the speaking as well. Well done, everyone who I see you aced it there, Gustavo. All right, so let's take an example now of a speaking activity. Here it is in the box. So let's say this is the activity. It says in your book, it says work in pairs, tell your partner a travel story. So you're planning this lesson. What are you thinking about as you are planning? So this is the speaking activity you want your students to do. So what are you going to do at the planning stage? Well, somebody's mentioned this already. So you can see what I've put on the screen is some scaffolding, right? So let's talk for a moment about that. Can you believe people have been talking about scaffolding in teaching since the 70s? And why are we talking about it? Because it's a way to give support. Just as the scaffolding holds up the building, we want to support our students and give them confidence, and here particularly to speak. Why does it help? It helps them to achieve the task. It helps them to solve the problem. It helps them get ready. And it helps to break down a bigger task like this, which might be quite intimidating for a lower level student. And if we just told them to do that straight away, it helps us to break it down into steps, doesn't it? Now, if you've got a good course book, you've already got scaffolding in there that you can notice and make use of. So I've got an example here. Again, I've got this, it's all from Prepare today. So this one's from B4. So this is the activity I've just shown you. So what have we got here? What scaffolding do we have to help students? Well, we've got some prompts, haven't we? We've got some things to think about, some thinking time before they speak. We've also got underneath some useful language. And then hopefully those two things put together is going to help them with the speaking task. But I have a question about the useful language. We see it a lot in course books, don't we? There's a useful language box, or use these phrases. I found another example here, just from a slightly higher level. This is from B2. So here they're talking about pictures. This is very related to the exam. And they are speculating about what's going on in the picture. So my question for you is, when you have this in your book and there's useful language, do your students use it? Do they use the phrases that are there in the box? Do they use it sometimes? Do they always use it? Do you want them to use it more? How do you encourage them to make use of it? What do you do? Because I think you're right. You know, if we don't do something with it, they're not going to use it, are they? They're going to just, you know, focus on the task and look at the pictures and you know, do the task to the best of their ability. But what can we do? All right, how can we get them using it? Dolores has got a suggestion already. So modeling, great idea. Let's think about together about how we can get them using this language, because it's going to help them to use the task, isn't it? All right, so number one, I think we agree on this. Let's not assume they're just going to use it. We have to do something with it. We have to build on what they know. So, I mean, there's a lot of phrases here. I don't think they need to use all of them. So maybe you can get them to look and tick the phrases that they know and get them to say, well, let's use those when you're speaking. We'll use those and one other phrase, for example. This one's really important. Make sure they understand it. They know the function, because they're often functional phrases, aren't they? And that's a good idea, Raphael. Get them to use it first before they do the actual speaking task. I think that's really important. Check they understand the meaning, Vanessa. Yes, make sure they can say it. So why not drill some of the phrases if that will be useful for your students? This is linked with the function, isn't it? How do they use it? So again, maybe you can do a little example with a student of how you can use it in a conversation. I think that's really important. And you've come up with this suggestion yourselves, is have a practice before the practice. And then my last tip here is to give them feedback afterwards on the phrases. So if your students can see that you value these and they notice that you're noticing if you use them or not, that's also a motivation, isn't it? And that's a lovely one, Bruno. Ask them to use a certain amount of phrases. I think that's a good idea. And let's keep it quite small, be realistic as well. All right, so we've thought about before and after speaking. What about while students are speaking? What are you doing while your students are speaking? I mean, hopefully you're not speaking yourself, right? We're letting them get on with the task. We're monitoring, noticing, listening to what students are saying. Yes, Ivana, just listen. And especially if you've got group work going on, I think we're noticing who is involved as well, aren't we? We're noticing who is participating. And I have a few ways I'm going to suggest that you can monitor and know who is taking part in each piece of group work without having to listen in very carefully. So some visual clues for you as a teacher. All right. So this one on the left, now I know you are teaching teenagers, but just bear with me, these can work with a teenage class. So the one on the left, you need some coloured blocks or coloured pieces of paper, it doesn't matter. But in each group, each student has one colour. So one student has the red blocks or the red bits of paper, and the other students have the different colours for their own. And when they're having the conversation, each time they contribute, they put one of their things into the middle. And then the next student to contribute puts their colour into the middle as well. So when you look at that table, you can see from the colours in the table who is contributing more or less, is everyone involved? And you can actually use this as a way to prompt your teenagers to take responsibility and make sure that everyone in their group is involved and that there is some equity and people are being encouraged to participate if they're being quiet as well. So that's quite a nice one. The one underneath, the talk tokens, this is similar. So this one, maybe you've used this one before, and it's often actually used with younger learners by having one thing, like holding a pen, and you can only speak when you hold the pen, and if somebody else wants to speak, they take the pen. Have you heard of that before? Well, this is similar, but all of your students have a certain number of talk tokens for a group discussion. This can be anything. It can be bits of paper or pens, whatever's lying around, paper clips, I don't know, whatever you've got in your classroom. So let's say each student has 5. And then in the discussion, each time they contribute, they put one of their tokens in the middle. So it doesn't matter this time about having different colours. But when they've used all their tokens, so when they've made 5 contributions to that discussion, they can't say anything else until everyone else in the group has used up all their tokens. So again, this is a great way to get learners self-monitoring in group work speaking and getting them to encourage others to take part. So quite a nice one, that one. And then the last one is, I like knitting, so I've brought knitting into this somehow. So you need some wool or string or something, and when you set a group speaking task, give each group a ball of coloured wool or string. Okay, the person who speaks first holds the ball and says whatever they're saying. The next person to contribute, they pass the ball of wool to them, but they keep hold of the end. So now there's a string going from one person to another. And then again, when the next person in the group contributes, the second person keeps hold as well. So now we've got the string going from this person to this person. Now someone else has it. And then by the end, you have this lovely web. And hopefully, and again, get your students to self-monitor, make sure everyone's involved. Has one person said a lot more? Do they have a lot more bits? Are they holding lots of pieces of wool by the end? And it helps you as a teacher because as you monitor, you can very easily see where a good conversation is going on. It's a very visual depiction of that. So if you like those ideas, I've taken these from an Oracy booklet, which I'll be giving you links to at the end. And Ruby, seems you like those. And Perla, that's great. So have a go, try one. Why not? It's quite a fun thing to do, and it really does raise awareness, I think, in learners about involving each other. Okay, we are coming to the last section now. I promised you some activities that you can integrate into your classes, or some approaches. So here's the first one. We're going to look at 4. Okay, so I'm going to show you a picture. Have a look at the picture. And I want you to really use this visual to get your students talking. So what questions would you ask your students to get them talking about this picture? Now, I have taken it from a course book. It could be any picture, but I'm interested in your questions. So stick them in the chat. What are you going to ask them to get them talking? Okay. All right. So I've got you thinking. That's great. And I'm going to show you some questions, and you tell me which ones you think are going to get students talking the most. So what can you see? Where are they? I think are good questions to start off with. But then you can't say too much about that, I think. You can say, well, people and their ladder and not sure where they are. So it's a good starter, but it's a little bit limiting. And you could almost say to that, there's a right and wrong answer to it, couldn't you? Almost. So let's think a bit more creatively. And I can see some of these questions in the chat already. Yeah, these are nice. What's the best thing about this job? Great question. What's the weather like there? Where do you think it is? Is it real? Dolores has her see, think, and wonder technique. That sounds fantastic. Here are some other questions. Tell me what do you think is most interesting here. So why are they here? What are they thinking? What has just happened? What's going to happen? What could go wrong? And what's outside the picture? So we can really influence the quality of language that our students are going to use by asking them different kinds of questions. And we do need to make sure this is right for the level, but also questions like this really get them thinking critically and really create a need to express themselves in English and use different vocabulary perhaps than, you know, people, ladder, cold, I don't know. So let's ask interesting questions. I'm going to show you another couple of questions. I want you to come up with even more interesting questions for these. All right, so take a good look. They come together in the course book, these two. So what questions would you ask about these pictures to get your students talking? I think the more you look at these pictures, the more sort of interesting they get. Is there a link between them, perhaps? Maybe that's a question. Your ideas, what would you think? What would you ask your students about these? Oh, yes. I like that. What are they talking about? Especially the men in the white suits there. Where are they? What do the jobs have in common? That's a nice one. Compare the jobs of the men in each picture. Are they happy? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, what's she looking for? What could have happened? Thank you, Bruno. Vanessa, your classes sound great. What a great way to prompt that. I love that. An episode of a crime show. Yes. Right. There we go. Okay, so next time you are using visuals, really think about the questions you're asking your students. Maybe you can even get them to think about some interesting questions and ask each other. There we go. We've still got more suggestions coming now. Okay, next activity. What is going on? That's a great question. Okay, next question, next activity. I'm going to show you 5 words. They are from a vocabulary set. Again, I've taken it from a course book. I want you to choose one that you think is the odd one out. There's no right or wrong answer. You have to choose one and then think about why. So you choose the one that you think is different, and I want you to pop this in the chat. Tell me why it's different. So there's no right or wrong answer, but you pick your odd one out and then tell me why it is that. So Carla says wetsuit. Why, Carla? What's your justification? All right. Oh, lots of people gone for wetsuit. So Perla, the other ones describe clothes for a formal event. Okay. What else? It's not smart. Okay. Bow tie. Right, I'm interested in a different one. Why the bow tie? Why is that one different? Vanessa and Raphael. Why evening dress, Christiana? Tell us, what's your justification? Okay, so the bow tie is an accessory. There you go, and the others are all clothes. Any others? Let me tell you, if you've tried this, you try this with a group of teenagers, they will come up with things you never thought of. You never even dreamed they could come up with yourself. And you'll also find they're so creative. They'll go into things like the spelling and its evening dress, because it begins with a vowel and none of the other ones begin with a vowel, or it's wetsuit because it's a compound noun and it's one word and all the others are two. So there's so many different ways to do this. And you can use it with any set of vocabulary. So I've taken this from, oops. Oh, sorry, something popped up on my screen there. I've taken this from, sorry. I've taken this from a course book. I've used clothes, but it could be anything. You could even get your students to brainstorm vocabulary from the previous lesson, and then create their own set, and then create an odd one out activity, and they can do this with each other. There's lots and lots of ways to do this. And the speaking part is the justification. That's the important part, and you'll find it generates lots and lots of talking. Okay. And our next activity is number 3. So we've got 2 more to go. We can manage this. This one is grouping. Okay, I really like this activity. So I've chosen some pictures here and I want you to look at them very carefully and decide 3 groups. So each picture, each word has to go in at least one group. It might go into more than one, but all the words, all the pictures must go into each of the 3 groups. So you'll need to choose categories, if you like, for these words or things. What would your 3 categories be? So you'll need to think carefully here. So remember the instructions. You've got 3 categories. All the words, each word needs to fit into at least one. If it goes into 2 categories, that's okay, but it must go into at least one of your chosen categories. What would those categories be? So any ideas? It is hard. Well, I've made it challenging for you. You're English teachers. All right, now we are going. Okay, office supplies, wearables. That's a good one. Things you find in a home. Oh, Pearl, I think you might have it there. You might have a good one there. Vanessa is thinking about what things are made of and how they feel. Great. Okay, we've got things for school. We've got clothes, furniture. Materials, Yvonne, is that what they're made of? So what would the different materials be? Okay, so again, can you see it? So we're doing this through text, but imagine how this is in a classroom when your students are working together and trying to work it out and trying to convince each other, and no, it's not that, and oh yeah, that's a good idea, and creating their categories. And then you can get them telling another group about it, and again, justifying, and they'll be trying to catch each other out and say, no, that's not made of plastic, and so on. So that's a really good one. And yes, I made it hard for you. I thought, come on, English teachers, you can do this. There you go. House chores, money, and wedding, Christiane. I think that is one of the most creative sets of categories that I've seen. All right, our final task here is about making associations. Okay, so again, I've chosen quite high-level vocabulary for this because you're a group of English teachers. So I've chosen some quite interesting idiomatic language. So you can see here, I've taken this from a book, and the language I want my students to use is these expressions using colours. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll model the activity, and on the board, I'm going to draw a house. And then in my house, I'm going to choose some of these expressions and I'm going to put them in a particular part or room of the house. And then I'm going to explain why I've put them there. Okay, so again, there's no right or wrong answers. And the key is you have to explain and justify your decisions. So I am going to put feeling blue. I'm going to put that in. Oh, no, that's not the first one. That's the second one. Okay, I was caught red-handed. So I'm putting this one in the kitchen because last week I made some cake and it was so delicious that every time I went into the kitchen, I took a very small slice. And one day my husband walked in and saw me taking a very small slice. And I think he was wondering why there was less cake each day. And he basically caught me red-handed. Yeah, so that's why I'm putting it in the kitchen. And my next one is feeling blue. So I'm going to put this in the bedroom because that's where I go if I am feeling blue. If I'm feeling a bit down, I like to be by myself. So I'm going to put that one in the bedroom. And I have one more. So I have chosen I saw red, Ruby. Yes, so this does mean you're angry. And I am putting this outside my house because as I was leaving the building the other day, there was someone walking by with a dog, and right outside my house, the dog did a poo and the person did not stop and pick it up. So I got very angry. I saw red and told the person that I thought they should pick it up, not very politely. So that's why I'm putting that outside my house. All right, so I would demonstrate like this and then get your students to do it. And I've chosen a house, but it doesn't have to be a house. It could be something else. It could be, and so actually somebody once did this with an elephant and chose different parts of the body of an elephant and put vocabulary in different places there. But it could be any set of vocabulary. The point is that it personalizes it. That's it, Bruno. And students are making their own decisions. They're making the language their own. They're practicing it, and they're doing lots and lots of speaking by justifying it too. Okay, so I hope you liked those. So those 4 activities we just looked at are interesting questions. We looked at finding patterns, relationships between words, classifying information, grouping it, and justifying it, and giving evidence for our ideas. So really good speaking tasks. They involve lots of critical thinking. And I should say that they all come from the Cambridge Life Competencies cards. Apart from the last one, that's not in there. That was, somebody told me about that many years ago. But you can find activities like this on the Life Competencies cards. They're made by Cambridge. You can download them for free, and the links are coming up really soon. All right, it's time to sum up. So I've put some key points here, but you'll tell me what you think your main takeaways are from this talk tonight. So we've talked about reasons why students don't speak. I think it's important to think about why students aren't speaking as much as we would like, and really think about what we can do and how we can influence what's going on in our classroom and how we can make it safe for them. We need to think critically. Remember, we looked at criteria for speaking, effective speaking activities. Think critically about the activities in our book or that we're trying out, and make the adaptations to make them more effective for our own students. So we thought about some of these criteria. You'll probably have other criteria of your own as well. We talked about scaffolding and how sometimes not doing these things is what causes students to keep quiet. So let's give them thinking time and example prompts, as you said, and things we can do with useful language as well. And then remember those 3 activities with the talk tokens and the yarn and the coloured bricks or blocks or paper, so we can encourage learners to get everyone participating. We talked about planning, and then finally we've looked at some quite interesting critical thinking speaking tasks, those 4 ones. And then my last tip here, for any speaking activity, I think if it does finish quite quickly, is to just regroup your students and get them to do it again, because it won't be the same thing because they'll be doing it with someone else. So I think that's a great way to extend and add a bit more speaking in. But you'll tell me. So those were my key learning points from today. But what about you? Is there anything that you want to try out from today? Was there an idea that you want to do? Maybe there's something that you've seen and said, yes, I do that already. I'm going to keep doing it. Maybe you have a question. It's time for questions now. And yeah, I don't know. How are you feeling now? Let me know. Links are coming up. So again, if you've got the QR code, you can scan that. Or take a screenshot, and the QR code will take you to a document with all of these links on it. And yes, let me know what you're going to try. Feeling confident, Christiana, that's great. Thank you, Dolores. All right, so we've got a little bit of time for questions. Have we got any questions, Katia?
Oops, here we are.
Hi.
Great
Hello.
ideas, Claire. I'm sure teachers loved it. So, lots of positive comments here in our chat. Come on, dear teachers. Do you have any questions to Claire? We have time for that. Take the opportunity.
Yes, do. I'll even put that slide up to encourage you.
Yes.
Even more.
You will have the recording available of this webinar in Cambridge Brazil YouTube channel, right?
Here's a question from Ruby. So how can we encourage those timid students to talk? Yeah, Ruby, I think we've got lots of things we talked about already. So I think all of the things we talked about, making that environment safe and giving lots of scaffolding and examples and useful language, I think that's really going to help. And I think it's giving pair work or small group work is best for the shy ones, and giving them space as well. I think that's really important too. So it's not about sort of always asking them in class and nominating them by name, because sometimes that can make them, retreat even more, isn't it? So I think pair work works better with our shy ones. But also I point you to those activities where we looked at getting students to encourage each other to participate as well. And I think if you're showing that you value that collaboration in groups, it doesn't matter if somebody doesn't speak a lot in a group, the key is that everyone is participating. So maybe try something like that with the talk tokens and lots of positive reinforcement. I think that really helps, in recognizing when students are making an effort, especially the shy ones. But let's go back to what we said at the beginning as well, because I think it's not always shyness that stops students from speaking. So I think it's really think about what could be the reasons why. For some students, I agree, it is that.
Good advice, Claire.
Questions?
I don't see any here. Gustavo is asking if we can go back one slide and show the links.
Yes. There you go.
Let's give teachers some time to scan the QR take a picture. I'm sure they will not want to lose all these ideas, Claire.
And I just seen that comment from Christiana. Is that a question, Christiana? Is it important to show your students that you're happy? I think it's important. How can we share this happiness through an online class? I don't know. I mean, I'm quite happy. Can you tell? I think we can do that. I think we can do it by really noticing how we express ourselves when we're online, by talking into the camera, by using that as eye contact. And I think also, if you're in a live online class, you can also message your students directly. I think that's a great advantage. So that's a nice way that you can communicate and encourage and motivate and give some positive feedback, and you don't have to do it in a very public way. So I think that's a nice thing to do. I'm not sure if that was the question or not, though.
Thank you, Claire. I will ask to post the link to the feedback and certificate once again. Sometimes we are paying attention to the answer and we lose control of the chat. Yes, you have the link there. Yes, you need to include your name in the certificate. Well, I would like to thank you once again, Claire, for accepting our invitation to our webinar. It's been wonderful. As usual, lots of creative ideas that I'm sure teachers will try them as soon as possible. And I would like to thank again all teachers who participated so well in the chat box.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Katia. And yes, and happy Teachers' Day for earlier in the week to everyone.
Exactly. Let's continue celebrating Teachers' Day. Thanks, everybody. See you tomorrow in our webinar at 3. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.